Hey folks, so this is a quick overview of a comic that I just received this morning, and I've just finished reading it actually. I don't know too much about it, but I was basically reading a kind of top 10, comics of all time related to science fiction, and this was one of the ones that was listed. It's not one that I've come across before in the past. So yeah, I was pretty interested to pick up the first issue. So this particular comic had a comic run of 5 issues, and they were published from October 1999, which was when this is from, and it ran until February 2000. Um, I really love the kind of artwork in this. Immediately from the front cover, you can see that it's clearly got some kind of cyberpunk influence to it. And I've never actually seen a comic, just from what I've seen so far, where you've kind of got it split into these kind of two panels. So up the top, we've got some really quite plain artwork. There's not a whole lot going on with it, but I quite like this kind of style of font or writing at the top. Has that kind of cyberpunk, maybe kind of 80s style, 80s, 90s style aesthetic to it. And then at the bottom, we have what looks to be a boarding pass for a flight, I guess. It was quite interesting to notice that this actually went for $5.95 back in 1999. So I think that's quite expensive for a comic, a single issue, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure what they were costing back then. Although this is 48 pages, and there's no kind of advertising in any of those pages. So that's quite nice to see. So maybe that was the expected price at the time. I'm not sure whether that was expensive or not, but I got this on eBay for less than £2, I think, which is unbelievable. The postage was maybe free, or it was like £1 or thereabouts. So it's in really good condition. I do like it, so I'll probably end up getting some kind of collected edition, because I'm really into sci-fi, and I prefer that kind of like more hard sci-fi rather than what I would call fantasy sci-fi. So I kind of feel like series like Star Wars and that kind of thing is verging more on the fantasy side of things rather than harder sci-fi that like Space Odyssey and these kind of old movies and books. So that's what I prefer, and I'm kind of was hoping that this was more that kind of style. So my favorite thing about everything about this comic is definitely the art and the kind of color palette that's used. It's got really nice kind of purple pinks, and gives that definitely cyberpunk look to the whole issue. So really enjoyed that. I'll give you a brief overview of like what the storyline is in the first issue. Like I said, I don't know a whole bunch about this particular series. I did a quick read on like Wikipedia for an overview of the plot, so I have some kind of idea on what it's about. But in this particular case, I'll just cover the first issue as if I'm reading it for the first time back in 1999, and give you my thoughts on it. So the opening page basically gives you this kind of map as to where the location of the opening scenes are. I'm not sure why they've put that there. I'm not sure if it's just to give you like some context at the beginning, or the actual location of where everything's happening is important throughout the series. But basically we can see we're in New York, and looks to be a girl called Luna, and it's her apartment that we kind of open into. And we also have heavy liquid bags on the table, it says there. So I guess this is the substance which the basically the book is all about. The next page we kind of is quite nice because I quite often forget names of characters, and this kind of opens by actually giving you a kind of list of who is who in this particular series. So the main character is called S, and we can see that it stands for S for the Stooge. And then we've got this child called Luna. The story is based about what they call the stuff, which is, it says here, it's a bizarre metallic substance that's lava-like at room temperature, heavy as a barbell, corrosive at the core. What is this stuff? Where did it come from? And what is it supposed to be for? And of course, this substance must be super important since it's basically the title of the comic. And then we've got three additional characters, Crunchy, Kip, and Drophead at the bottom. They're the three tough guys who work for a shadowy crime syndicate. I guess these are the kind of enemy of S, the Stooge, and Luna. So the opening scenes, we kind of head straight into what is a parade in New York. And I really loved these panels. I think the type of illustration really kind of makes you feel the kind of parade atmosphere. It's like a little messy. You can see that there's like a lot going on. So I really enjoyed looking at that. And basically after that, we kind of go into the setting of Luna's apartment. So S is cooking up something in the kettle, and they're kind of having a conversation where, you know, you're not really too sure what they're talking about, but there's a bit in back and forth about how, you know, Luna doesn't want to talk about a particular person in their past. And they get into maybe not an argument, but a kind of confrontation where S is saying that this particular other character, you know, saved him, and Luna doesn't want to talk about it. And throughout all these panels, there's constant reference to heavy liquid, so you get the impression immediately that they're kind of like cooking this substance, which is exactly what they end up doing. We also get a background to the actual characters themselves. So it turns out that Luna is Puerto Rican, and she's kind of like talking about, you know, wishing she could have been back home to taste her kind of mum's food. And they keep referencing this person who appears to be Puerto Rican as well, called Luis or Luis. It's not really clear, is this guy like related to Luna, who's also Puerto Rican? I'm not sure at this point, and I don't think it really explains that in this particular issue. But basically what happens is, as we kind of like work our way through this, we can see that they eventually cook up the heavy metal, and they kind of put them into these kind of like little vials. And then S basically has to head out into this parade. And what is happening is he needs to go out to make a deal with people who are kind of like trading in this heavy metal. So he goes outside and basically gets in a taxi, and this is where we kind of find out the background of S. So he has a conversation with the taxi driver and explains that he's from, I think you pronounce it, Tangiers, which is in Morocco, North Africa. And they kind of get into a kind of general conversation about like Morocco and like the heat over there because it's freezing in New York. And S says that he misses his wife and his kid. So throughout this panel, we just get that background that he's basically not from the States. His friend Luna is from Puerto Rico. He's from Morocco, and he has a wife and a kid back home, I guess. And at this point, we're introduced to these kind of three shadowy characters. I can't remember their name now, but they have these kind of like distinctive masks and that kind of thing on. And I guess they've identified that he's in the taxi, so they're basically trying to find him, and we don't know what they're going to do. So I'll just skip forward through some of the smaller parts. So what ends up happening is the S ends up taking some of this heavy liquid, and what he explains is that it's basically a poison that will eat away at your fingertips, it will dissolve your throat, but basically what Luna realised was when they cook up the heavy liquid, it turns to a kind of black milk. And I don't think you can swallow it, but you can put it in vials, and then you can kind of like add it to your body through your ear canal. And this is probably my favorite like couple of pages in the book. You can see he's in the toilet trying to do this, and his arm there becomes like really elongated as the kind of drug starts to kick in. And I found this panel like pretty hilarious as well. It looks ridiculous. His arms become really, really long, and his legs as well. So obviously that's just what he feels. I don't think that's physically actually happening to him. So he heads out. They basically describe the feeling of the drug as kind of looking through broken glass or something like that. It's not really clear what the drug actually does at this moment. But he heads out, and basically he needs to go to Chinatown. And when he gets to Chinatown, he basically visits an art dealer and asks to see Mr. Chao Zhu, and he's led upstairs to a kind of like area with like some other Chinese guys all kind of sitting around hanging out. It's got your kind of classic kind of villain vibes, and that is, you know, is an art gallery with this kind of like speakeasy in the back, with a whole bunch of people just quietly sitting around. But the guy he wants to go and speak to isn't available, so he speaks to Chow Jr., and then they get into a long conversation about heavy liquid. I keep saying heavy metal, but it should be heavy liquid. So it becomes apparent that they're there to make a deal. S is just trading the heavy liquid for money, basically. But what happens is that who this is for is a really old man. He's like a rich art dealer. And S starts to kind of quiz him on exactly why he wants this substance. And Junior basically explains that, you know, he's got so much money, he's so old and kind of like frail that he just ends up not really knowing what to do with it. So he surrounds himself with things, and in this case it's like artworks and art collections, but that is never enough. So he's ended up in the seedier side of life. I think he says here, if you were typical, you'd go for the illegal or pornographic and consider yourself satisfied. So basically that's why he's interested in it, but it goes a little bit further than that. He says that what they're doing is taking this heavy liquid, this metal, and making an alloy for it by mixing it with other metals. And what they're wanting to do is find an artist who can actually do something with the metal. And S says that, you know, he didn't know that would be possible, and he's worried that it's dangerous to kind of mix this metal with other metals, because this particular one, heavy liquid, isn't stable. So the final scenes, we see that Charles Jr. gets a call, And it's actually quite funny because the phone and the video phone they use, obviously it was 1999, so we didn't have any kind of iPhones or anything around. But basically, he gets a call from the main man, Mr. Chao Zhu, and that's basically the final scene where he's thanking us for making the delivery. And let me see. Yeah, it kind of ends there. So it kind of leaves us at a bit of a cliffhanger. Like, we still don't really know what this liquid is. We don't know its potential. It's pretty weird that it's being used as a drug on one hand, but on the other hand, you know, you've got guys that are kind of wanting to mix it and create alloys and artwork, possibly, and sell it that way to make money. So yeah, it's all a bit vague in the first issue, which is to be expected, but definitely the story has enough in it that it makes me want to read more. So I quite like just getting the first print, first issues of these comics, just as something nice to collect. And I also like looking at you know, the real issue as it was all those years ago. Now it's like 22 years old, because it's nice to have. So I kind of collect these first issues, but if I like the first issue and I want to read more, then I'll go ahead and get the collected books. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this overview. Like I said, well, I haven't said, but this is only my second video. I'm trying to kind of basically talk over like some comics, just as a way for me to kind of put my thoughts out there. And if anybody likes to kind of listen in, then they can. My videos are really, really basic. It's just a camera set up in one go with no fancy editing or anything like that. But sometimes it's fun just to hear other people's opinions. Like I said in my first video, I'm not expert in comics. I've only started like reading these kind of single issue comics in the past year. And yeah, this is just a way for me to sit down with a coffee and talk about, you know, what I think about these. So hope you'd enjoyed it. And I've got a few other comics on the way, which I'll talk about maybe in the next week or two. And hope you can subscribe, leave comments if you want, and tune in next time for more comic overview.